All right, guys, stick around today. You're going to want to make it to the end of this video because I'm going to show you the secrets to bow drill fire that almost no one on YouTube is telling you. Okay, so let's get the easy stuff out of the way. The components of the bow drill, we've got some kind of bow. This is just a piece I've already kind of cut and pre-strung. You'll notice on one end, I've got a fork that's just easy enough to tie off on. And then when you get to the other end, I've actually just notched this out so that the cordage will stay up in there. Some people like to do bank line on here. I actually prefer paracord because I put a little taut line hitch in back here. So based on the diameter of my spindle, I can slide that taut line up and down and loosen or tighten my string as I need it. It is important for me that I make the taut line down here on the end where I'm holding from. Up here I just have a little bowline knot, makes a little loop on the end that just slips over this threaded end. Just hear the dove up there on top of the thing, that's crazy. So again, just a notch down here to hook it in. It's pretty straightforward. I usually go from armpit, stretch it out, armpit to like mid palm, into my palm, somewhere that end. You can go a little bit further, but I know I have a tendency as I'm bowing to dip my elbow if the bow is too long. So that's about the right distance for me. So another piece I'm going to be using here, this is going to be my hand socket that goes up on top. Just a little piece of a tree that I've cut off that I just kind of wallowed out right here. Just a little pit for my spindle to set up inside and rotate. So then aside from that, I've got a stick over here for batoning. We're going to use that as a hammer. And I've got the two little pieces of willow right here. This is going to be my hearth board and my spindle. So we're going to sit down and try to make these for you guys real fast. Just so we're done with them, I'm going to be making my spindle. It's going to be sharp on one end. This is an old one, by the way. And then the other side is going to be domed off. And that's what's going to sit inside my hearth board to rotate to build up that friction. I usually look for something about thumb thickness. I'm okay if it's a little bit thinner. Some people prefer a thicker one. Some people prefer a thinner one. It is a preference thing for whatever works for you. Thing about a smaller one, you get more rotations per stroke with a smaller one, but the bigger ones I tend to make up more dust, so usually end up with a bigger coal. So there is a bit of a trade-off with that. This is going to be your hearth board. We're going to make that out of this piece here. I usually look for about thumb thickness on here, so something that's, you know, probably no higher than an inch tall. The thicker it is, the more dust I'm going to have to build up before I can ignite it across the top of it. The thinner it is, when I start putting it under pressure, the more likely I am to break it off. Now, normally when I was doing this, I would be doing this on some kind of cold catch so that I can move it inside of my tender bundle, but we're just going to do it right here on this cutout round. Aside from that, I've got a multi-tool over here, and I'll probably use it just to do my notching with the little saw on the side of it, just since I'm going to try to do this quickly for you guys today. And then I've got my SE5. And it comes with this little divoted out pocket right here that my spindle is sitting down inside to spin and rotate. Now, you could use something like the little SE strikers over here. These work quite well and hold out. I will tell you, these get hot. Something as simple as this rock with this divoted out hole in it works perfectly fine. More often than not, I actually use this little divot hole that's in the scales on my knife. All right, so let's start on our hearth board first here. Take my knife, and I want something that's wide enough for my foot to go in, so that I can put my foot down on one piece of it and then have plenty of room over here to work. So I'm just going to start on this piece. I'm just going to start squaring it off. Trying to keep it roughly about an inch or so wide, and then create that flat spot here. Got a couple knots to deal with on this one, but it'll be all right. Way. Starting to take some shape here. Just chopping this down just to kind of square things off. It's looking pretty good. Just trying to make sure it's relatively planed off through here. I'm going to do the same on the bottom because I don't want it rocking. like a heavier knife because I can do more chopping than I do carving. So that's good. Let's get the sides now. That one side's really all I'm worried about, but we'll go ahead just for sake of making it pretty. We'll do the other side too. Just really important that I have that one side that's nice and smooth. Oop, that didn't cooperate. And when I do my notching and stuff, I want to, so I'm right-handed. I'm looking at this. All right, so if I'm doing my notching, my left foot's gonna be right here. Push all this out the way. So I'm doing my notching, I'm gonna be facing out this way. My left foot's gonna be right here, so I want my notch over here so that it's facing me, so that I can see if the dust is filling up. Just checking my depth here, I think that looks good. Just kind of smooth it out here just to make it pretty. Get this one knot off the very bottom, got this little knot right here, and that might cause it to rock just a little bit, so try to nick that out. All right, I think that'll work pretty nicely. So we're, roughly about an inch wide across here. Let's do our spindle real fast. Looking at this, I usually want about this far on my spindle, so I'm going to take this end of it off here. I'm going to make this, since this is the wider spot on the stick, I'm going to make this my dome up here, and this down here will be my point. So just trying to chip these knots and stuff off the side, make it pseudo smooth across here, keeping in mind that a sharp knife is safer for me to work with than a dull knife, so this thing is pretty sharp. Even though I'm just sitting here doing a lot of chopping, still very capable of doing some carving, which is going to be important when you get down to this point. All right, we can work with that. That'll work. Let's make our dome up here. This is the part that most people struggle with. It's just the doming off. So all I'm doing is drop back about 3/4 of an inch. And I'm just chipping away as I'm working my way around. And then when I go all the way around, I'm going to go up just a little bit and chip away more and just keep rotating it around. You notice I've left the bark and stuff on here. I'm going to take all this off here in just a moment. But when I'm doing this piece of it, just because I am doing a little carving, it's typically a little easier to hold on to with the bark still on it. And I'm just continuing to rotate, continuing to chip away until there's no flat spot left whatsoever on the top of this willow. And we've got a nice little dome. So now I can just take the bark off. I like to do that just because, it doesn't really hurt you for it to be on there per se, but obviously if you got like knots and stuff on here like this, you want to take it off, but I like to just get all that stuff off there so the string's not binding up and all that good jazz, so you can flow smoothly with it. Just got a little bit of this inner layer left on here, but all the big stuff's off. Keep going because I just like it to be pretty. It doesn't have to be gorgeous. It's not gonna hurt it to be a little more ugly. Sometimes some of the prettier ones I've ever had didn't want to work at all. And some of the cleaner ones, and some of the uglier ones actually, ended up being some of the better ones. But this one's pretty good. Relatively straight, got a little bit of a turn to it, but I think we can work around that. Let's just soften this one edge up a little bit here. Take a little bit of that turn out. All right, so here's our spindle. Sharp on one end, domed off on the other. It's really important that this be thin enough to sit inside of your hearth board and spin without it hanging over either side of it. So it's important that when I lay this on top of here, I've got material on this side of the hearth board and this side of the hearth board, because we're going to tunnel through the middle of it right here. All right, so now we have hearth and spindle. So now to fit this to it, I need to slide my taut line back a little bit. Slide that taut line back a little bit, make sure it stays in my notch up here. I'm going to come dome up through the middle, twist it and lock it over, and then I'm just checking my tension, and that's about right. Not a whole lot of slippage. And by coming from the inside and locking it and flipping it over, I've put the spindle on the outside of my bowstring, so that, like, if it were on the inside, so if I locked it, I'm not sure how to do that. I've done it this way so many times. If you lock it on the inside, you see it's going to run up and down the side of your bow here. It's actually going to slow you down and make it a little bit harder for you to do. All right, so from right here, we're just going to pick a good spot on here. I'm going to say I'm going to do it right about there. So I'm just going to go through and just pick a little spot out, start making a little divot, and this is just for the actual spindle to ride in while we're trying to get this cut in. Just a little divot. Actually, I'm going to move this because that's going to rock on me here, so just move that out the way. All right, so I'll flip this over, move some of the stuff out of the way. So I'm a righty, so left foot down on here. I'm going to set this down inside this divot right here. All right, so moving you around so you can see the posturing a little bit. All right, so I'm going to go left foot on top of here. I've got all of my hangover here. This is where the spindle is going to go right here. Elbow to the outside of the knee over here. I'm going to lock my arm coming down, keeping as much connection between my forearm and my shin boat as possible, just to kind of keep the wobbling down. Get this hook back in the notch. Big thing about doing bow drill, you want to get comfortable, because there's not a whole lot comfortable about doing it. Oh, sorry. I was ready to use my knife. So accustomed to using it. So start out nice and slow, just kind of waiting on the actual hearth board and the spindle to mate. Just looking for smooth. And then once it starts to smooth out, I actually got a little bit of smoke there already. That lets me know that those are mated together and we're safe to do our notching. So I'm going to pull this in, turn it down. So this is what I was working in. You can see this end was slowly starting to mate to that. Try to get that nice little indentation. And then from there, I actually started to build up a little bit of dust already, but we want to go ahead and start doing our notching. So my notch, I want to come in not all the way to the center, but really close, with just sort of a pie-shaped slice through here. It's always important to, when you start out with your notch, start out small, because you can always make a notch bigger, but you can never make it smaller again. Not without just completely redoing the entirety of the process. I'm also keeping in mind that where I have made this little burn in right here, it's only just the tip end of here, So this burnout hole is going to be a lot bigger. So I'm just kind of envisioning where it's going to hang over at. And this notch is where your dust is going to hopefully fall through and collect. Once we start the process, if all of a sudden you see you're collecting more dust around the outside of it, around this ring here, instead of inside here, then what's happening is my notch is too narrow. I don't need to widen it up some. I think that's probably, let's make it a little bit deeper. That's close. And I like to go to the bottom here and just kind of open this up a little bit at the bottom. And it just kind of gives a little more room for some more dust to collect. Just makes another little secondary divot down there. Get all that stuff out the way. See how the dust collects. Okay, so I'm just going to start real slow again. And just see, I'm not trying to burn my arms out, but I just want to see if I've got dust falling down in the crack once we start producing some, or if it's all going to collect on the outside. Let's throw a little bit of heat on it. So you guys can see here, we have a little bit of dust collecting around the outside here. We've also got some dropping down through the middle here. So I've got a little more collecting on the outside than I would prefer, so I'm going to widen that up just a hair. But in doing so, I'm going to save my dust, no sense wasting it. I'm going to take that notch just a little bit deeper and a little bit wider. If the notch is too wide, your spindle's going to have a tendency to jump out. Since we moved off that board, I'm going to put my little cold catch down right here. This is just a little piece of a shingle. So when we start out, I'm just focused on smooth and steady until we build up some heat. Once I start seeing a little bit of smoke, I'm going to start applying a little more pressure and speeding up a little bit. And then as we start to get that dust and I can see it start dropping, I'm going to apply a little more pressure, a little more speed, and all I'm doing is I'm just watching for that notch to fill up. Let me move you guys. You guys can see over here already, all that stuff is starting to fill up and drop down in there. So it didn't take long. All right. Build up the heat. So once the dust fills that notch all the way up, then at that point I can bow with as much pressure and much speed as I can give it so that it ignites across the top. Get squared up and see. Now's the time to not rush. Got plenty of time here. A lot of people go through and get in a hurry and break their coal up. Got more than enough stuff going on here now at this point. This should sit here. Probably burn for a few minutes now. I've had these things last between 5 and 10 minutes easily. So one of the important factors of bow drill, one is the wood selection. Willow, which we're using here, probably one of the easier ones to learn. You want a soft wood for these two pieces. Willow, cottonwood, things like that. It's also important that you try to keep the spindle. Also important, you want to keep the spindle perpendicular to the ground so that you're not wobbling, messing your hole up. Also, another important factor is the color of the dust. If it is too much like milk chocolate colored, you're not doing enough downward pressure. It should be really close to black like this is here. Also, another secret is understanding that the balance between speed and pressure changes throughout the entire process. I'm going to start out with nice and slow, steady until we get it mated together in here. and I can start applying speed. Once I start getting those little plumes of smoke, then I can start adding more pressure. Once the dust is built up to the top of the notch here, I can start increasing that pressure, increasing that speed, and that's what's gonna do the ignition across the top of it. Once you get it built up to the top, you can give it pretty much as much pressure and speed as you can possibly give. So that's what gets you over the top. These things are really cool. It's a great kind of gimmicky gag to be able to do. If I'm out in the woods lost and I'm trying to survive, I'm not doing all of this. That's how you get your campfire buddy. You don't have to go through all of this work, all this hassle of sitting down and doing it. Does it get easier? Absolutely. I've done enough of these things that you can see it only takes a few minutes to sit down and crank one out. It's never as fast as that. So, sit down. All right, guys, hopefully you could see that once you know the balance and the components of it, it really doesn't take that long to do. Like it's not something that's overly involved, and I was kind of lollygagging through that. And so bow drill, it's a wonderful party trick. It's neat to be able to do. Every time I do one, you know, there's something about it that feels very primal, and you want to kind of bang your hand on your chest and grunt and throw things. But when it really gets down to it, I'm not surviving in the woods that way if I have properly planned out, and I'm not relying on rubbing the sticks together to go out there and make a fire. I'm not doing Tom Hanks, you know, Castaway out on the island. I'm flicking my bick and getting my fire. So go into the woods. Be prepared though to spend the night anytime you go out there, just in case you have to. An ounce of prevention is well worth the pain on the backside if you don't. You guys enjoy. If you're out on the trail right now, as always, just remember, left foot, right foot. Repeat. We'll see you out there soon.